Okay, so what are we talking
Gentlemen.
about? You can't expect 50 years to be all wonderful, but mostly it was wonderful. But there's always bumps in the road, and you're never gonna, but you hope not all the wheels come off. I think that though there's always ups and downs in careers, you can never have a career that's going to have a trajectory of going upwards permanently. It just doesn't happen. But I think that the fact that it's still going is a pretty good achievement.
The greatest rock and roll band in the world. They're incredible. Let's hear it from the stars.
Please welcome Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Ronnie Wood, the Rolling Stones. You fell down, right? Yeah! Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are live around the world. This is global. This is very important. A lot of people are watching this.
Very early in Los Angeles.
Yes, very early in Los Angeles. I have one question, though. What is this about? What is this for? Why are we here?
Well, we're here. I feel like I want to stand up. We're here.
Yeah.
But we're here to present our new single, which is called Angry. Don't get angry with me. I'm in a desperate state. I'm not angry with you. Don't just spit in my face. The ones that know with the teeth and the claws. My mouth's getting sore. I can't take any more. Angry is the first single from our new album called Hackney Diamonds, which is why we're in Hackney, and which comes out in October the 20th.
That's right.
So that's why we're here.
Happy.
Well, it is a special album, and we are very pleased with it, and we hope everyone likes it, so we'll give it a big push.
You have to have one almost like nuclear core that's sending out energy, and it's Jagger.
There's no progression. There's only sort of forwards and backwards don't really exist because you don't know if you're going forwards or backwards or sideways. You could go backwards to right to where you began.
We now know that the young Mick Jagger saw Ramblin' Jack Elliott. That's Woody Guthrie's greatest disciple. That's Bob Dylan's great hero. When Ramblin' Jack Elliott was over here in the 1950s.
His holdings are in Texas, and his name is Diamond Joe, and he carries all his money in a diamond-studded jaw.
This is before Muddy Waters, before Howlin' Wolf. Jack Elliott was on a subway platform, and Jagger was a schoolboy in short pants and cap going to school. And someone had a guitar, or maybe Jack had his guitar with him, and he gave an impromptu concert. Jagger was one of the schoolboys that Ramblin' Jack Elliott was entertaining. And we now know from Jagger's description that I saw a guy in a cowboy hat singing on my way back from school. He was holding an impromptu concert for us school kids, and we all gathered around, and more school kids gathered around. And Jack Elliott had this story about, I was in England once, the best concert I gave was on a train platform, British rail platform. And we now know the young Mick Jagger was one of those kids. And that is how he got turned on to music. Not Howlin' Wolf, not meeting Brian Jones, not meeting Keith Richards, not playing Muddy Waters music. That's how I got into music.
We really think of the Rolling Stones and the Beatles going into America and them really conquering the West that way. What's not talked about as much is American music coming in through the different ports, like whether it's London or Liverpool into the UK. Mick Jagger being a part of it, Keith Richards being a part of it, getting those early blues records, those jazz records, and there being an underground scene here in the UK, specifically in London, a lot of clubs where kids would congregate and listen to this music. And you have to remember, still at this time, we have segregation in America. And there's still, even in the UK, it was not as integrated as we like to think of it. So to be listening and participating in this sort of culture at that time period was dangerous, was something that I think, especially a middle-class kid like Mick, it was flirting with something that was not expected of someone like him. And he was definitely a part of that burgeoning scene that we see going into the early 60s.
How did all this start? Well, we just met each other in jazz clubs in London about 2 years ago.
And the group developed from there?
Yeah, from there, yeah.
Do you write any of your own music at all?
Yeah, quite a bit of it.
The Rolling Stones actually kind of started as a band called Little Boy Blue and the Blue Boys, which played, funny enough, blues. And it was Richards, Jagger, Dick Taylor, The Pretty Things, a guy named Jeff Bradford, and some local kids. It was just, you know, goofing around, trying to find if anybody had a tape recorder. But unlike a lot of high school and garage bands, they kept at it. Jagger and Richards, they were true disciples, right? They were just infected with this bug. There was never a point where Jagger and Richards split up and didn't want that. They kept going, they kept going, kept going. Some names came and went, some players went and went, but they were always blues disciples. To this day, they've never stopped preaching the blues.
We can't even remember who played the bass on the first gig. It seems to be there's some doubt about who was actually playing. No one can, because we wrote down, oh, this guy played the bass. He used to play the bass with the Kinks, Mick Avery. And then he wrote a book and said, I didn't. So I went, okay, you didn't. And what can I tell you? It's like lost in the mist of time. So there's been a few personnel changes since then.
The Rolling Stones were sort of forged by the blues, which then sort of represented a kind of an authenticity and a danger and a kind of an edginess. And they were named after Muddy Waters song, and they covered loads of blues songs. And in a way, that's always been the sort of the heart of the sound, and I suppose the heart of how they feel about themselves.
My first awareness of the Stones were that they were this kind of threat to society, you know, these kind of hooligan delinquents who were just doing a naughty thing.
In those days, what the press portrayed as wild was actually, you know, in our world now quite tame, you know. But for those days, people were easily shocked. You've got to remember that it was still a very shockable society. There wasn't the kind of scandal mongering quite in this way as there is now, which is, you know, sort of scandal on a daily basis. There's a stable diet of that thing. So, but they loved scandal, of course, the newspaper. So they used to play it up a lot. But and so even though we didn't really do that many shocking things in the early days, people were easily shocked.
This number has been like...
I don't remember my parents saying very much about them. My parents, you know, kind of reasonably liberal and tolerant attitude towards the Stones. But I sort of was intrigued, you know, there was something about Jagger and his strange sort of androgynous quality, these lips and this incredible kind of swagger that he had.
Your love for me has got to be real. Boy, you don't know just how I feel. Love real, not fake.
forced to crush barriers and rush the plane. Quarantine officials threatened...
You must remember that a number one in those days was a real number one. It wasn't just you went to number one and you'd sold 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 singles. Today, you're lucky to do it on 30 or 40,000.
He was so natural on stage, he just had it from the word go. He just was so in love with himself.
Everyone knows something about Jagger. He's a household name. Even, for instance, my parents and their World War II crowd, they weren't Rolling Stones fans, but they knew Jagger was the guy with the big lips, and sometimes they'd be on TV, and someone's parent, I talked about this with my parents saw the Rolling Stones on TV, and they started going like this, imitating Jagger. That's what dads all across America did. They started going like this and acting silly. And Jagger has a defined image. It's his lips, of course, are the logo of the band, the famous logo of the band.
You have to be really narcissistic, I think, to carry off that kind of thing. When you are the front man and all the focus is on you, my God, you've got to believe in yourself.
There's something in a lot of rock musicians, certainly the singers, particularly the singers that don't play an instrument, that singer doesn't feel it's enough. We witness time and time again in rock and roll, pop music, it's not.
I think it's more common for lead singers and solo artists to want to be in film and make that transition. You see that all the time now. Mick Jagger is just one of the kind of early, if you would, pioneers to try to make that transition, because I've already ruled the stage, I'm already an international star. I now need to be an idol on the screen as well.
Yes. What is it?
I got a fly.
A fly?
In my eye.
Why?
Because you're afraid of him.
Yes, right. And he's afraid too.
And Jagger's done well by films, but it seems to be this restlessness that singers have. And I don't know where it comes from or why. You would think they'd be so pleased to be in such a successful band, but I guess they want to expand the net as far as they can.
I think the greatest, they dress different, and the best things that ever happened in the United States.
Why do you like the Rolling Stones?
Because Keith is beautiful, and they're great, and because they're so ugly that they're appealing.
Things started happening for us.
Well, why did they start happening?
I don't really know. Something sort of chemical reaction seemed to have happened somewhere.
Mick Jagger is just a fox. Like, even now, you're just like, ooh, hello.
So we went into the studio, in, like Ronnie said, in December, and we cut 23 tracks, and very quickly, and finished them off in January, and mixed them in February. I don't know how we managed to keep it under our hats, because normally Ronnie talks about things even when I don't want him to, and he'd tell everyone, I say, don't forget, don't mention the album release date.
A lot of people say to me, oh, I didn't know you painted. I mean, many years it's been going on like this. But it's great. It's another string to my bow that I've always done ever since I was little. I took inspiration from the trees in the forest where I live in Berkhamsted. There's a beautiful forest called Ash Ridge. And while walking through the forest, I see the trees turning into guitar shapes, and while I've got music on my mind, I express it artistically. I think everyone should have a stirring spirit to make them achieve a bit more every day that they can. Every time they feel creative, to express it somewhere.
Another insight into an ongoing machine and institution that will never stop rumbling, who knows. We didn't get this museum idea with the thought of retirement. No, it's just another you know, another input into the travelling circus.
You don't really have that much to go on for this kind of exhibition. I mean, there's lots of exhibitions and art installations, and yeah, there's been the David Bowie one, which I never saw, I'm sad to say, and there's the Bjork one at MoMA in New York. But that's like it. You know, there's not like, it's not like putting a movie out and you've got comparing it to other ones or a TV show. You know, there's not that many of these kind of things, really.
Notable things and artifacts from music, you know, over the years, whether it's guitars or picks or little trophies or things that people have given me. Let's just gather things together and let people have an experience in a well-designed space.
Oh, we're so proud of the new batch of songs, and it's always great fun, and it makes you step up to the plate, raise the bar higher, and that's what we do. We always try to get better and improve and bring the latest energy. And Lady Gaga sings really sweet on Sweet Sound of Heaven.
Sweet sense of heaven. Tumbling down to the earth. I hear the sweet sound.
A lot of bands nowadays, they go from the garage straight to 5 million people on Britain's Got Talent or something. You know, it's sort of, they need that bit in between where they play the circuit and they play the pubs, and we should open more venues, I think, to new bands, you know, so they can get the experience of touring and enjoying the road, you know, like we did.
I don't know. How do you compare it with the Beatles? I don't compare it at all, you know, there's no point.
Well, let's get right down to brass tacks. Do you think you're better than they are?
What? You know, it's not the same group, so we just do what we want and they do what they want, and there's no point in going on and comparing us. It's diplomatic, you see.
Very diplomatic, and I don't want to labour it, but do you feel you do what you want to do better than they do what they want to do?
Yes. Probably. I don't know. I don't know what they want to do, you see. Very diplomatic.
The Rolling Stones' debut single came out only about a year after the Beatles, and the Beatles had such a kind of instant impact, but they were there was something very friendly about them, that they definitely represented the kind of new energies of the 60s and youth, but they were still friendly. They were kind of like, you know, a gang that sort of larked about. And Andrew Loog Oldham very smartly positioned the Stones as the kind of threatening ones, that they were the ones for the, you know, for the older siblings. They were the ones that had this kind of, this sexuality and this menace and this whole idea of, you know, would you let your daughter go out with a Rolling Stone?
We never really consciously cultivated this anti-hero image thing. It was just the way things evolved, and then people tried to get us to wear uniforms at a certain point. I don't really know why.
I was heavily into the design and the image, really, and it was away from the Beatles, everyone looking the same in suits and ties.
There was something just much, I think probably just sexier, blacker, funkier, darker, more dangerous about the Stones. You know, you know, their grooves just had a sort of dirty, primal sort of quality to them, but also a poetic quality. Whereas, you know, I love the Beatles, but I just couldn't have followed them to the ends of the earth.
The Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album was revolutionary. It was terrific. It's the cover design by Peter Blake, the music. It's very difficult nowadays to imagine the impact that had on a kind of black and white world.
So they were sort of in step with the Beatles for a while. You could say that Satanic Majesty's Request was sort of their Sgt. Pepper, much less good than Sgt. Pepper. I think that they sort of realised it wasn't really true to them. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel authentic.
Bias with things like flower power. I don't know. we were getting into sort of beads and hats and flowers when we did the London Palladium show last Christmas. But so we got a bit fed up with it before the summer came.
Because of commercialisation?
No, because we were just sick of it after about 2 or 3 months. When you're talking about flower power, I don't mean ethically, I just mean very superficially, the beads and the flowers and everything.
Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Who could hang a name on you when you...
Correspondingly, at the same time, you know, they were busted. They were targeted by the police and to some extent by the media. And I think they felt, you know, it's almost like they were victims of this whole swinging London psychedelic Carnaby Street thing. So it was almost like the hippie fantasy, you know, everyone was kind of wearing flowers in their hair, had sort of come around and bitten them on the arse. You know, it hadn't worked well for them, and it wasn't really musically true to their own blues roots, I think.
As the 60s developed, the national newspapers, which had now taken rock and roll to its front pages, became more and more interested in rock stars. So therefore, they'd spent years being utilised by people like Andrew Oldham to build up their artists. So now they were interested in trying to bring them down.
Tipped off the police to raid Keith Richards' house at West Wittering. In the house were found traces of cannabis resin and a pipe in which cannabis had been smoked. Evidence that an unnamed naked woman was sitting on a sofa with a rug around her was given in court today. There goes lunch for Fraser and Jagger.
Inevitably, the Stones find themselves at the centre of this new counterculture, this new, quite decadent scene. You know, drugs came in very early for everybody. I mean, you know, everyone was smoking weed in the early 60s. I mean, much earlier than anybody realises, I think, and they were already starting to drop acid by 65, 66. So, you know, by 69, you know, Keith is using both coke and smack. You have to say that those drugs do contribute to the sound of the Stones.
Face charges for possession of drugs. Jones admitted that he had taken drugs in the past to a slight extent. Passing sentence, Mr. Reginald Seaton told Jones, "You occupy a position by which you have a large following of youth, and therefore it behoves you to set an example."
Jones was charged in his full name of Lewis Brian Jones, a musician. His long fair hair was rumpled and he wore an open-necked shirt with a flowered pattern. Detective Sergeant Robin Constable asked for a remand so that a substance which he said had been found when police called at Jones's flat between 6 and 7 this morning could be analysed. It's alleged that the substance was cannabis, and Jones is charged with illegal possession of it. The police did not object to bail. This was fixed at £2,000, and the remand is until
The psychedelic thing just went out the window, and instead came in this kind of slightly dishevelled, I can only call it, it's like a sort of, they will look like aristocratic tramps. You know, you look at the sleeve of Beggar's Banquet, you know, and there's nothing sort of, there's no sort of paisley or there's no flowers in the hair, there's nothing, they look like, you know, they look quite sinister, actually, quite sinister. So out of that comes Jumpin' Jack Flash, which is just like, wow. I mean, what is that? It's just a million miles from Ruby Tuesday. It's dark, it's lo-fi, it's gritty, it's got this slightly satanic element. It's much more satanic than Satanic Majesty's Request. You know, who is Jumpin' Jack Flash? Is that the devil, you know?
But it's all right now. Back is a dance, but it's all.
They were better when they were moving into this kind of, you know, this sort of darker, more turbulent territory, and there was always that sense that they played on, and in fact the tabloids certainly expanded on, was the sense that they were dangerous.
So they seem to be channeling the zeitgeist, and the zeitgeist is we've gone past this sort of love and peace thing, and we've gone into something that's much more edgy and frightening. And so I think they turn rock and roll into something really quite dark and primal and alluring and sexy and sinister. And it turned into this glorious run of records.
In the late 60s, you have this incredible run of songs where Gimme Shelter, which is really sort of sums up this apocalyptic end of the 60s vibe. Sympathy for the Devil, you know, in which he gets to be, he gets to be Lucifer. It's inspired by Bulgakov's novel *The Master and Margarita*. So it's quite a kind of highbrow allusion, but which created this wonderful kind of like feverish, evil samba feel, which again sounded like its era. You can't always get what you want, which was almost this great sort of epitaph of the 60s, and Street Fighting Man, which is ostensibly a protest song, inspired by, you know, Mick attending a anti-war rally, but actually it's about him not being a protest singer. It's going, what can I do, you know, but sing in a rock and roll band. And they didn't need to be sort of particularly convincing politically. Their very existence seemed, you know, rebellious and significant. All right.
What were you doing before you joined?
Well, just sort of bumming around waiting for something to happen, really. You know, I had quite a few jobs and I was trying to get a band going, but it was unsuccessful until I met up with Mick and Keith.
Brian Jones was the Rolling Stones, yeah. Brian named the band, formed the band, rehearsed. It was his idea, everything was him, yeah. He played with Alexis and the band that Alexis had, that Charlie was playing drums in. He actually persuaded Alexis to let him get on stage and play. And he heard an Elmore James record for the first time in his life, which I never heard one until about 65 or something, or 64. He said the whole universe shuddered, you know, when he heard this, you know, that slide thing. He immediately got a slide and started playing, and there he was playing when Mick and Keith first went to see the Alexis Corner band.
My ultimate aim in life was never to be a pop star. I enjoy it, with reservations, but I'm not really sort of satisfied, either artistically or personally. Oh, I have a lot of regrets, but generally speaking, no. I'm very satisfied with what's happened. The whole prospect of marriage rather frightens me. It's rather like signing a contract. Whenever I sign a contract for anything, I want to read it carefully, because, you know, you're signing a part of you away.
I've never received a penny from Brian at all. The only time was right at the very beginning when Mark was born and I was in the nursing home. He brought me some clothes and things to come out with, and he brought Mark some things to come out with, but that's the only time that he's ever brought me anything. I feel quite sorry for Brian in a way, because the kind of person he is, he can never be happy, could never have true friends. He's not the kind of person that you take to, because he's so cynical. He's got no feelings for anybody. He just uses people for his own good, and when he's finished, well, he throws them aside. So I just feel sorry for him.
Pat supports herself and Mark on national assistance and the odd job. Yet Mark's father is reputed to earn £1,000 a week.
Mark's father is Brian Jones, better known as one of the Rolling Stones.
It could be much more exciting than this, but there will be rather a few more people, about 8,000, I guess.
I believe so.
But how are you keeping? I've read in the paper you got a layoff for a few weeks, that's true?
Well, not me particularly. We're all having a holiday, and I think we all need a holiday. We have about 6 weeks off, I think, and we've been working very hard. And my resistance was very low, so the doctors tell me. And when in America, I picked up this virus, which they still don't know what it is. There's a growing...
This holiday comes a very convenient moment to give you a chance to recuperate.
Nina Pallenberg was a German-Italian model/actress that Brian Jones was involved with. And Brian Jones was a notorious ladies' man. We definitely think now that being Mick Jagger being the Casanova of the Rolling Stones, which I'm sure he was, but Brian Jones pretty much got, you know, a lot of the top models and attractive, desirable women of the time, and Nina Pallenberg definitely fell in that category.
She was right to leave him, and I think Keith represented some kind of white knight figure. You know, the idea of Keith being a white knight is sort of amusing, but actually, you know, Keith is a pretty decent bloke underneath everything. You take away all the piratical heroin addiction, all that. I mean, he's a good guy, you know, and I think for Anita, you know, he did represent something quite noble and romantic, if you like.
But what this does is this makes more tension between Jones and Richards within the Rolling Stones. Jones becomes more absent from recording sessions, and his drug use really starts accelerating after the union of the model and the guitar player.
Brian walks into the studio expecting a band to be there. They'd actually recorded the track the day before, and there, leaning against his guitar, is a note saying, "Play only on these 24 bars, nothing else." And again, it was like horror, because they'd done the whole song without him, and they didn't actually want to be in the studio.
But downgrading Brian meant massive loss of self-esteem. It was a gradual process of moving Brian to one side. Mick had been encouraged to grab it all for himself, and then when Mick had taken the bull by the horns, Andrew then worked on Keith to make him like the number 1.5 guy. I would say once Andrew realised the potential he had in moulding Mick into the focal point of the band and pushing him up front, he realised he had a casualty in Brian Jones because Brian wouldn't conform and fit in. And as far as Andrew was concerned, he was out. Brian Jones became a major, major problem. Initially, it was his band. Andrew took Mick, pushed him up front, encouraged him. Didn't really encourage Brian at all. He couldn't cope with the press coverage, which was all centered on Mick. So little things happened. He was not told about recording sessions. He would be picked up late for the transport for a gig. When he pushed it the other way and decided not to be there and would say, "I'll be an hour later," they just left him behind. From what one knows of Brian's early life, maybe the music business was not the best business to be in. Maybe to be in a band that became so important and so big as the Rolling Stones was his wrong choice of band. Maybe he should have just played blues with Alexis Corner, who was like the godfather of the band, the musical godfather.
Let's face it, the future as a Rolling Stone is very uncertain.
Jagger has a business mind, and Brian Jones, while he was a true believer and loved the blues as much as Richards or Jagger, didn't have the drive and the focus on the business side of things as much as Jagger did. Brian Jones had the focus on the rhythm and blues. That's true. Brian Jones had the focus on Chess Records or Stax Volt or Duke Peacock, various American record labels. But he didn't have the witherall that Jagger had. Jagger studied at the London School of Economics. He studied at LSE. He was taught by people like Peter Jenner, really erudite instructors that knew their onions, be it laissez-faire capitalism or strict Marxism. So Jagger had a background in how to make money, how to save money, and if I don't know how to save this money, how to find somebody who knows how to invest our money.
As I understand it, it was Mick and Keith that told Brian he had to go. In a way, as I was told by Andrew, Brian took it as relief. And the atmosphere, once he left or was out, changed dramatically. but you just somehow felt that Brian wasn't long for this world.
Brian and I had drifted apart, and I was living under the impression that because Brian's dream had become a reality and that the band was extremely successful, that Brian was, you know, very happy. So I feel anger at the fact that the two people who should have been there protecting him and, you know, taking care of him were actually the two people who were taking the band away from him.
He had it on a plate, because in the very early days of the band, he was the great enthusiast. And because Jagger started to push him to the side with his greater knowledge of economics and the business world, and because Keith Richards and Jagger formed the songwriting partnership, which is the other key dynamic in pushing Brian Jones to the side. As Brian Jones never wrote songs to the Rolling Stones. Brian Jones tried to write songs. He never came up with a finished song. And as far as we know, he didn't even come up with a key component to any Jagger-Richards composition. So as Brian Jones is pushed aside, he's self-medicating more and more. And you can't go on the road with a guy that's doing that. And you can't get into America with a guy that starts getting arrested for drugs, because he's a target. And if you get a visa for America, you're a lucky boy. And if you get to America, they're going to strip search you at LaGuardia or JFK or Chicago's O'Hare Airport, wherever the hell you land. So Jones was a marked guy, and after leaving the road, they did a tour of all things, Poland and some Eastern Bloc countries in 1967. The Stones had been off the road over 2 years. They wanted to get back on the road. Taking Brian Jones was a non-starter, so they had to ask Brian Jones to leave the band, which is, he started partying, and in just a relative few days had drowned at the pool I so crassly visited one day in the late 1980s. And it's just a tragedy. Had he lived, no doubt Jones would have done something with his life and career. His death, well, that's a whole other story.
It was very important to us, the fact that we were going to go back out on the road behind a new record, that we resolved this thing with Brian. So Mick and I had to go down and sort of tell Brian virtually, like, hey, cock, you're fired. Yeah, the fact that he was expecting it made it kind of easier, I guess. You know, he wasn't surprised, and I didn't really even think he took it all in. He was already up in the stratosphere, you know. It was kind of like, yeah, but there was no serious way that we could consider going on the road with Brian. So that was, but at the same time, nobody expected it to happen just like that.
They had different reactions to different drugs, and whatever Mick and Keith were taking, Brian wasn't. So therefore, you had people on a different path.
About midnight, Jones went for a swim with his Swedish girlfriend, Anna Volin, and another friend, Mr. Frank Thorogood. After a time, Mr. Thorogood and the girl went back to the house. When they returned, they saw Jones at the bottom of the pool, and they pulled him out.
Charlie phoned me up. Phone went about 3 in the morning, and I just got off to sleep after about an hour. Charlie phoned me up, and he just said Brian died.
One thing in retrospect that Keith and Mick have said about Brian Jones, and other people like Nico actually have also stated, is that he was very self-destructive with the drugs and the partying, and had a lot of, the proverbial internal demons, and that it wasn't if, it was more a when in terms of he was going to die. So I don't think it was that much. It was surprising and shocking and sad, but I don't think it was completely unforeseen, him passing away.
peace. Peace. He is not dead. He does not sleep. He has awakened from the dreams of life. It's we that are lost in stormy visions and keep with phantoms an unprofitable strife. And in a mad trance we strike with a spirit's knife, invulnerable nothing. We decay like corpses in the charnel.
The 1969 tour of America is a really quite a big tour. You know, they play Madison Square Gardens, and it culminates in this free concert that they give near San Francisco in December '69. This really hastily put together and rather ill-advised, ill-conceived event takes place at the Altamont Speedway. The Hells Angels are drafted in as the security service, and it just from the get-go turns very nasty. They beat up Marty Balin of the Jefferson Airplane. I mean, this is one of the artists, you know, and they're meant to be the security guys, you know, and anyone who gets anywhere near this pathetic little stage that's about 5 feet off the ground, you know, is beaten up. Right in front of Mick Jagger, you know, this guy is murdered. He's knifed to death, and Jagger doesn't realise that's happening in the there and now. They have lost control, and he's out of his depth. He doesn't know what to do. It was a really scary moment. It was a real reality check for them. You know, I think the Stones went in a more hedonistic direction and a slightly less political direction. It's almost like, okay, we're not spokesmen for our generation anymore, and we're gonna sort of, yeah, we're gonna go in just a more kind of funky, hedonistic, sort of aristocratic jet set, you know, Stones in exile, kind of partying in you know, in the south of France sort of direction, I think, which doesn't mean the music is it, but it's just less. It is not channeling the darker elements of the zeitgeist, and I think so. Something changes in the Stones' mindset at that point.
You write records and songs are not something that you can predict. You know, suddenly there was a bunch of stuff to do, and Charlie had gone, and I think in a way we wanted to re-energize. You know, the band saying, "Hey, we're still here, and listen to this." You know, so it's rock and roll in our familiar fashion.
He had a fairly normal life at first, as he wrote about in his autobiography, Life. But his parents split up, and it deeply affected him, as you can imagine, because he was still a fairly young guy. He became enamored with, or perhaps already was, with his grandfather, Gus.
He was in a jazz big band called Gus Dupree and the Boys, and from a very young age, Keith was around this, seeing this performance. And again, we look up to our grandparents, so I'm sure it was quite aspirational.
And the wonderful story that Richards recounts is his grandfather, Gus, had this guitar that he put up on a shelf above the piano. Richards could climb on the piano stool as a type and primitively hit the keys of the piano. Not really playing anything, but Gus would encourage him. He loved his grandson. And on these walks, he would tell the young Keith Richards, when you're tall enough to get to it, take it out of the case, I'll teach you to play it.
And so Keith would stack pillows up one on top of another to try to get up and reach the guitar. And I think that sort of not quitting, that sort of attitude of just sticking with it is, you see that even now, decades and decades into the Rolling Stones, and that kind of dedication and that aspiration starts at a very, very young age and is instilled in him, I think, from his family. So you really see with the Rolling Stones as they go into the Beggar's Banquet, the Let It Bleed kind of time period, they shift with Keith's style. He always had a little shaggier hair, but the hair gets shaggier and longer. He starts being, I would say, you could see some, dare I say, glam rock elements kind of coming in with scarves and vests and fringe and velvet and more luxurious kind of materials.
I steal clothes from other people. I embrace them. That if I say I like that shirt, and I forget the guy actually feels obliged to give it to me. And no, I didn't really want to take the shirt off your back. You know, if I like something, I got to say so. You know, and I accept gracefully and wear it until it drops.
Summing up 2 days of evidence, the judge told the jury they had to decide two things. One, did Keith Richard know of the LSD which police found in his jacket pocket after the crash, or had one of what the judge described as his entourage put it there whilst wearing it? Two, the necklace in which the traces of cocaine were found. Was it the same one that Richard was photographed wearing 4 days earlier? And could he therefore have known of the presence of the cocaine? Well, the judge ended his summing up by saying that the jury must dismiss from their minds any feelings about pop music or pop musicians.
How do you think this conviction is going to affect you and your music and the Rolling Stones?
I don't know, I just want to get on with it now that it's over. You know, just get on with what I'm supposed to be doing instead of worrying about this, you know.
Do you think it will have any effect, though?
I don't know, I might get a song out of it.
What do you think about the way the case went?
I don't think anything. I didn't know what to expect, and what happened is what happened.
I don't think you can talk about it very much because we haven't had a chance to talk to the lawyers or anything.
Have you decided whether to appeal or not?
That's what we haven't decided.
So it's just really immaterial.
You know? What made you decide to come Mick Jagger to the case?
It's a bit wrong to the go. I never miss a good case.
I talked to him and we decided from there, you know.
Why did you come over, Mick?
Because I wanted to be with Keith.
Well, what did you make of the case?
No, I don't think I want to say anything. No, but because it may be, it may go to appeal, so I don't want to say.
Fame is something that you have to learn to live with. Because it comes along and you don't really think about that when you're doing it. I want to make a record, I want to make some good records. And then you do, and then suddenly this thing called fame comes in. and you have to learn a whole new game, to deal with that, Mostly, I think the guys have dealt with it pretty well. Some of us fell by the wayside, and others you just get used to. But fame by itself don't pay much.
I'll be working totally with the Stones for the next 6 months. My book has suffered a bit as well. I've had to put that back, which I thought was going to come out by Christmas.
Right.
And now that's going to be delayed 6 months. My solo album's going to be delayed. Fortunately, the restaurant was just about finished, so that was all right. But the rest of my projects and plans I've had have had to be postponed. We decided to go out together again. We made that decision. And then on our next phone call, a couple of days later, we decided to get engaged, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then a couple of days after that, Mandy said, well, if we're going to get engaged, why don't we get married? So it was really spontaneous. Well, Sticky Fingers came from Stones album, and I thought it was a great name for a restaurant.
Weren't you tempted to call it Goat's Head Soup?
Well, I didn't think people would eat there. But well, there are a few names, Beggar's Banquet.
There's 12 tracks on the album, and 10, well, I think actually it's not true because it's not on one. But most of it with Steve, but 2 are tracks we recorded in 2019 with Charlie. And so we used 2 of the tracks that we recorded with Charlie before.
Yeah, Live by the Sword and Mess It Up.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 tracks.
Yeah.
And also I heard a rumor of Bill.
Yes. Bill, and we asked Bill to come into the studio.
Oh, it's creeping. Did he get it? Live by the Sword.
And Bill came in and did 1 track. So we had the original Rolling Stones rhythm sections is on one track.
Oh, you know, it's ever since Charlie's gone, it's different, of course. You know, I mean, he's number 4. He's missing, he's up there.
I'm not happy here, but Where are you happy? At home. You have a home? Yeah, you see, this is where maybe I differ from the rest. The fact that, like, when I'm at home, I can pick a book up and play a record, you know, and I have a wife and that. It makes you a bit sort of cosy in a way, I suppose, but I like it. I'm happier at home.
We're selling our music back to American boys who probably never even heard of the people who we copied half of it from. This was in the beginning, but I suppose influences, yes. We're selling our influences back, our way of doing it. Maybe it's more acceptable the way we do it.
It was more of a family than a band, because I'd never been in a band longer than like 3 months. So when the Stones asked me to join, they talked in terms of a band, you know, commitment, in other words. So I thought, oh, this will go on a year, and then next year could fold up.
Did you think when you started out you were going to do this for 50 years? Of course we did. I thought I would be sitting next to Charlie for the next 50 years, talking to him about the Beats.
Charlie is, you know, still in the heart, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I did see a lot of number 4s around here.
Yeah, of course he's missed, I mean, incredibly. Yeah. But thanks to Charlie, what's also, we have Steve Jordan, who was Charlie's recommendation for if anything should happen to him. Steve Jordan's your man.
He picked Steve Jordan.
Yeah, and just out of the way back. With, and also, you know, he's been a friend of ours. I've worked with Steve. So it was a kind of natural progression. You know, it would have been a lot harder without Charlie's blessing on that, you know. But at the same time,
there are some retrospectively very funny quotes from Mick Jagger from around 1969, where he's just like saying, oh, I can't imagine doing this when I'm 30. Wouldn't this be ridiculous? And quite a lot of the time they just go, oh, you can't be the Rolling Stones and like old. And by old, they basically meant over 30.
You know, no one could see beyond 30 at that point. So now it's like you could be doing this when you're 80, Mick.
You've still got the rebellion, because there were those brilliant headlines, isn't there? Lock up the doors as the Stones are coming.
Look up your grandmother's now, the same.
Does it make you laugh now you've got kids and grandkids that was written about you?
I did this show in the southern United States, and there was a poster outside this college. It said, Mick Jagger slept with your grandmother. It was a joke, so it was quite funny, really.
it's rock and roll. That's all I know, and that's all I'm good at. And, I'm a terrible plumber. I'm just telling it like it is, as far as I'm concerned.
And the Stones were really sort of the pioneers of age, of tenacity, of growing old, and yet somehow they became sort of frozen in time. If you see Mick and Keith now, they haven't really sort of settled down. They're versions of their younger selves. So they've become iconic in a way that I don't think they could have predicted when they were younger.
I never asked myself the question, why, until people would say, why do you do this? I don't really know.
I'm a little red rooster, too lazy to crow for day.
It's in
one of the most important rock bands so far in music history.
I'm a little red rooster.
Yeah, you can't really deny that.
Too lazy to crow for day. Keep everything in the farmyard. Upset in every way. Dogs begin barking. Hounds begin to howl. Dogs begin barking. Hounds begin to howl.